So, Chef Cimarusti, talk to us about when you anticipate reopening Providence, assuming that you will.
Well, we're definitely going to reopen. The question as to when is sort of up in the air at the moment, although, our governor here in California, Gavin Newsom, has sort of given us, a bit of a tease and said that an announcement as to the easing of restrictions would be coming in perhaps this week. So we're not quite sure what that date will be, but we do know that, news is coming this week.
How are you preparing for reopening? We're obviously looking at pictures out of Texas this week, which showed some fast casual and other types of restaurants reopening. But with distance between bar seats and with booths closed, for example, do you have a plan for the reopening of Providence?
Well, yeah. Restaurants are businesses that thrive on win at capacity, and it seems like in this new normal that we won't be able to fill our restaurants to capacity, and so that causes us to re-examine our budgets and reforecast for sales and costs and that sort of thing, and those are exactly the type of calculations that we're making right now.
What will employment at restaurants look like, Chef Cimarusti? I mean, given that you're going to have fewer covers, let's say, every night, and given that raw materials may not be as easy to come by, maybe more expensive, I mean, who knows, right? But the supply chain is definitely messed up at the moment. Do you imagine that it will be a smaller restaurant at the end of the day?
Well, I think it will. I think, mandated capacity is going to be, much lower than our actual capacity, and so we'll have to adjust for that. In terms of supply chain, I don't anticipate too many problems. Especially at Providence, we deal with, boutique farmers and artisanal fishermen and craftspeople and that sort of thing. And so I feel like the ingredients that we need to do our job will be there for us when we're ready to get open again.
Of course, there's been a lot of trouble with the PPP program and with restaurateurs trying to access it, and small independent restaurants trying to access it as well. Have you any updates for us on how it's proceeding, how your colleague chefs have been managing?
Well, I think there's definitely been an issue with that. I do have friends who sort of run the gamut in terms of the size of their restaurants that have been able to get PPP loans. I think the real problem with the program is the fact that, the loan origination date, begins the day you're funded, and, you have 8 weeks from that moment to spend that money in order to have it be forgiven. The problem with that is that if you live in a city or a state where, you are forced to be closed, what good is that money? Certainly, it's good in the sense you can keep your employees on the payroll, but there is a real possibility that for many restaurateurs that they won't be able to reopen their doors before that 8-week supply of cash runs out. And at that point, you're back to square one.
Yeah, exactly. How viable will it be as an industry, Michael, if you're looking at increased costs for protection for employees, fewer employees because fewer covers, rent maybe the same unless, each individual restaurant can organize some kind of a deal with his or her landlord? What does the future of the industry look like? What are you most concerned about?
Well, I'm most concerned about all the things you just mentioned. It's certainly, I believe that the future is not as bright as it had been at one point. I think, especially here in Los Angeles, we were in the middle of a sort of a restaurant boom, I think, and many places, including our own, had some of the best years that we've ever had recently, and clearly, that forecast is changed greatly and not for the better. So it's going to be, it's definitely going to be a difficult road back. But, Providence has been in business for nearly 15 years, and we survived the economic collapse of 2008. Clearly, the situation is more dire, but I believe that, I think that we have the skill set, and I think that we also have the support out there among Angelenos, to bring the restaurant back. And I think that there are all sorts of restaurants out there that are in the same boat that we are, and I feel like Angelinos especially, and I can speak to that because this is where I live. But from everyone that I've spoken to, people are itching to get back out there once it's safe to do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I do feel that there will be support for the industry.
Yeah, I think that goes for across the country. And I was reading a statistic earlier that people spend 50% of their food budget out on food out, right? So that would make it seem like people will want to replace that habit going forward as well. There's only so much you can eat at home, and of course, to be able to eat meals from chefs like yourself is an absolute treat. That said, will prices go up, Michael?
Well, I mean, I think that remains to be seen. Obviously for commodity products, there is going to be a strain on the supply there, and so those prices will probably go up. In terms of the ingredients that we use, I'm not quite sure. I know that a lot of these boutique farms that we deal with, they've got product that they really can't sell at the moment, and actually a surplus because restaurants are sort of their lifeline to success, and we're a key part of their sort of like supply chain, and we are their end market. And so the fact that we're closed, makes it very difficult for them. So I think when we're able to reopen, we'll find that some of our prices will remain as they were, and some will probably rise. Yeah.
Chef, take us inside the thought process. It must be extraordinarily difficult to decide to reopen and what date to reopen and who to call back in terms of employees and who wants to come back, particularly when you read stories like the one that just came out from the New York Times that internal documents in the administration suggest that deaths are actually going to rise, maybe double in early June. How do you decide, okay, this is the date and we're going to reopen?
Well, first of all, I think we have to wait for guidance from our governor, and then when that announcement is made, I think myself and my partners will sit down and we'll assess and decide if we feel that not only the climate in terms of our ability to keep our employees and ourselves safe and our guests safe, but also is the world that we're opening up into in terms of, having a restaurant that can only be seated at 25 or maybe 50% capacity, is it worth reopening at this point, or should we wait a little bit longer until it's, more safe and until restrictions are lifted?